Hello, I'm Gordon from Triton. I want to show you how to replace the locking pin on an Untitled Superjaws. It's not a difficult job to do, and it's well within the capability of anybody with basic tools. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but very easy to show on the video. Very first thing I want to do is slide the moving jaw off and put that aside. That is quite an important first task to do. And now I'm going to roll over the Superjaws onto its back, fold up the legs so to get them out of the way to give me more space to work. Okay, so that brings me now down to the pedal. What happens typically is that the pin needs to be replaced because it gets badly marked and it doesn't hold tension with certain sizes of timber or certain sizes of metal, and you might want to drop a new one in, or you might at some stage have pressed the foot pedal down too far without the foot bracing on and the pin drops off. And it's probably quite a typical problem that people have. And getting the pin back on is a little bit tricky. It's not hard, but just a little bit tricky. Now I'm going to show you how to do that, but given that we have the Superjaws in this position here, it's not a bad idea that if you're going to give your Superjaws a service to fit a new locking pawl and a couple of new springs. Now to do this, what I do is I brace the leg in that upward position there with a good strong piece of 4x2 timber, and while I have it there I'm just going to pull out the locking plate, and that takes the pressure off the locking pawl. Now to get the locking pawl off, I'm just going to use this little hook tool. Very, very easy to use. One off, two off, and the lock pawl comes out like that. Now I'll just stick my fingers down there and I'll gather up the two screws, or the two springs, and refitting a new lock pawl or just putting the old lock pawl back in is the exact reverse of that, where I'll push it through like that, seat it into position nicely. It goes in quite snugly and there's really only the one way it'll go, and then I put the first spring into position and I'll pull that up there, just press it down, and that goes easily onto there. I'm going to put the second spring in exactly the same way. Now pull that spring up and it locks in. So as you can see there, they're locked in beautifully. I could also use a long nose pliers, and have done that many times in the past, but I find that little hook tool very, very useful to use. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refit the lock pin. Now the lock pin, as I said, has a knurl on it here, and that knurl fits into a crimp in the pedal. Now that goes in like that, and if you just sort of move it around you can feel it, and I don't know if you heard it click, but it clicked into position, so it's now locked firmly, but it has to be able to move around, of course, but it's now locked, and no matter what I do I can't pull it out, which is telling me it's in the correct position. And what I want to do now is feed this pin back through the lock pawl that we've either just replaced or we've tidied up. And to do that, I pull out the piece of timber, put it aside, and I drop the pin into the corresponding hole on the lock pawl. Now, because this is a lock pawl, in this position I'm in here at the moment, it won't allow the pin to go through because it's in the locking position, it's in the lock position. So just using the piece of timber, I'm going to put pressure on the lock pawl like that, and the pin moves up and down now within the lock pawl. And in the spirit of just doing a service, I'll just put a little bit of general purpose grease on there. That makes a big difference. And then just hit that there and you can see that it's moving up and down perfectly. What I will do now, I'll just put the legs back up like this. So we're really reassembling Superjaws completely. Putting the bracing in. I said we were doing a minor service on the Superjaws, so I'll give a liberal squirt of WD-40 in the mechanism back there that can get a little bit gummed up. And I now turn the Superjaws over and I'll replace the sliding jaw like that. Just test it for running, and what I'm going to do now, drop that piece of 4x2 in, pull the jaw, and lock it, pull the lock, and that is working just perfectly. And that's the simple repair to Superjaws.